Welcome everyone to our Connect with Caro expert series. I am so excited to have you here and to welcome a dear friend of mine, Sylvia Farbstein. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about Sylvia because her story is powerful. I met Sylvia at National Speakers Association, not because Sylvia was a speaker, but because her son, Brandon, was a motivational speaker. Now, Brandon has a rare form of dwarfism, and he has made a career out of for himself in anti-bullying, motivational speaking, standing tall. He's the author of a book, doing all these amazing things, sharing his very, very powerful story. So I met Sylvia as his momager. You know, she's like the manager who runs his business and gets him booked and does all these amazing things. Now, I thought that was a very special relationship because you see a mother and a son working together, sharing the passion. It's a beautiful thing. And that's how I met her. But when I was on the phone with her, chit-chatting, she started saying some things that blew my mind. And I thought, I want to interview you. I want to share you with my community because the wisdom that this woman carries, the wisdom that she shares is so incredible. And then the funny thing is that I thought I was being innovative and I was going to be like the first person to share Sylvia with the world. And then I started looking her up and I realized everyone wants to talk to Sylvia. She's on all sorts of podcasts. She's being interviewed all over the place because she is absolutely phenomenal. So Sylvia, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for your very, very kind words.
I am dying to share you with my community because I think the story is so powerful, but I want to start at the very, very beginning. Could you tell them a little bit about what you went through when your son was born, how he was diagnosed with dwarfism? You know, share that story with us.
Absolutely. So just to get you a little bit of context about who I am a New Yorker who went to NYU, got a finance degree, worked in banking, met my husband on a blind date, and within 11 months got married and moved my entire life to Richmond, Virginia, of all places. Didn't think I'd ever leave New York City, but at the same time, I was open to adventure. And I thought, okay, I'm going to have my corporate life planned out and I'm going to work and not skip a beat. And, I'll get the help that I need with nannies and all that. And so I continued, working full time, had my daughter, Brooke, 2.5 years later, gave birth to Brandon, and life seemed to be just moving along at, a quick pace. And then I took him on his 2-year checkup. And the pediatrician said to me, "Oh, he looks good. Get him dressed, take him home." And I said, something in my gut tells me otherwise. It seems like the growth of his torso seems to be a lot more rapid than his limbs. And that's when the doctor took a closer look at him and said, "Oh my goodness, I have to send you to a geneticist." And he sent us to one that happened to be in our area, but was very well regarded. And life just changed in that instant because, I grew up in my generation, my parents are European, not to question authority, especially the medical community. They all know better than any of us. But that moment gave me this light bulb that as a mom in particular, we really have to hone into our gut and trust our instinct. And at that moment, I realized how important it was to speak up when you feel like someone may not be paying attention to something that you see. So that took us to this whole long journey. And it took 6 months to diagnose Brandon, because at the end of the day, they needed to send all of his skeletal x-rays to the UCLA Skeletal Dysplasia Registry because they had no idea what they were looking at. And Brandon was diagnosed with a very rare form of dwarfism, and there are hundreds of different kinds, called metatropic dysplasia. And he is one of 84 cases in the world. So, being this woman who thought that I could have it all And, as long as like I knew the steps to take forward, life would unfold the way I envisioned. It all went out the window. And I realized that predictability is not really the end game in life. And this genetic mutation that surprised us all, because neither my husband nor I have this on either side of the family, kind of, took our life for a whirlwind. So
let me ask you a question. Was he your first child?
No, he had an older sister, Brooke, who was 2.5 years older. So it kind of gave me the insight to realize that his growth rate was different. And I think, if I hadn't had my daughter to compare him to as a first-time parent, I may not have even known.
Yeah. And when that happened to you, I assume, like you said, it was even genetic. It's not even only that must have disrupted your entire life.
It was a disruption, but at the same time, what I quickly came to realize alongside my husband is that we were going to be on a path that had very few answers, because when we would ask the specialists and the doctors, what can we expect? They really didn't have much to tell us. All we had access to at that time, and this was 20 years ago, all we had access to were these outdated medical journals with these black and white pictures of patients with that diagnosis who had these severe deformities. And I knew that that wasn't going to be what we are going to focus on. My husband, Steve, and I decided, okay, we're just going to give Brandon the best life that we can give him. We had no idea what that would look like, but I think that really made a difference in our way of thinking. We didn't really spend time in the grief or the shock. We decided to focus our energy on moving forward in a productive way and really shifting our mindset to the abundance of his life rather than the limitations that might be coming his way.
Wow, that is very powerful. So I have a question. Did at any point you go through grief? Did you go through that at any point? You said that you quickly shifted, but did you at any point have to kind of come face to face with that grief and then shift?
I think in my case, grief would come and go. It would be in moments of seeing his peers, in the later years, especially, growing and running and doing all these activities that Brandon wasn't able to do. Grief would come in moments of when he told me, Mom, I'm going into high school and I just want you to know that I'm never going to go to prom. I'm not going to go to the dances. That to me was grief, because I remember those moments in my life that brought me so much joy. My daughter was homecoming queen. I saw how amazing that experience was for her. And I was like, what do you mean you're not going to experience this? How do you know already? And he said, it's just not for me. So I had to sort of lean into the grief and also realize it's his life. It's his journey. And I think sometimes we as parents, out of our loving hearts, want to create a life for our kids that is aligned with what we experienced. And we want to give them so much joy and so much happiness that we think in order for them to have that in their life, they have to do the same things that we did. And so I had to let go.
Yeah.
And once I learned to let go, it created space for things that I would have never imagined for his life.
I think it's such a beautiful thing. And I don't want to let go of this point just yet, because when you say grief comes and goes, you're basically giving everyone in this room permission to experience pain and joy simultaneously. It's not like we got this diagnosis, we had to get over it and move on, and we can never be upset again. We can never, we don't give ourselves permission to feel. No, it's actually a very fluid journey. It's we grieve and we move forward. We grieve and we progress. We grieve and we find new ways of joy. It's a simultaneous thing. It goes hand in hand. And we don't have to experience what you experience to have that. Everyone in this room has grief in their own way, and they have to experience it all the time. So I think your words are gold with how you approached it. The other thing that you said that I really want to highlight is this idea that we create expectations of what our children's lives should look like based on what our journey was. And I think we all experience that as parents is, well, I had this need, so therefore I'm going to make sure that I fill that need in my child. But maybe your child doesn't have that need. Or I had this experience and therefore I want my child to relive the same exact experience, but that wasn't his journey to live, to learn that and to have that wisdom.
Or sometimes, we don't get to experience certain things in our childhood. And we have like this gap, this hole that we want to fill by ensuring that our kids experience that. And sometimes we're like forcing them to live out our dream. And we have to take a step back. I mean, especially during these last couple of years, our kids have been filled with turmoil and stress and chaos and noise and anxiety. And in my heart, I truly feel that we have, as parents, sometimes unknowingly contribute to that. And so what I've learned, and I had to learn this really quickly on, that like there were no growth charts that they could plot Brandon's growth and compare him in terms of the percentile. And I remember taking him to kindergarten orientation and the principal of the elementary school saying, your goal as a parent is to make sure that your kids get such amazing grades that they are either on the gifted track, or when they go into middle school, they have to take all honors classes so that in high school they could take as many APs as possible, because that's the only way that they could compete. And what I did was I threw all that out, because I knew my goal was to make sure my son would be able to be healthy. And, there were several major surgeries that we had to navigate him through. And I had to fight with insurance to get them to approve not having it done locally where we live in Richmond, Virginia, where they said, oh, you have orthopedic doctors there. They could do this bilateral osteotomy. And I said, but how many of them have done it on someone with his form of dwarfism? And I needed to use all of my energy to really fight and advocate for him. And what I realized was I don't have the capacity to buy into what that principal was saying, in addition to doing what it takes to ensure that Brandon had an equitable life. And what I mean by equitable life, like I literally had to learn to take a step back and see things through his eyes and understand that, okay, these are the step stools that he'll need in classrooms in order to reach things. These are the things that we'll need to ensure on an ongoing basis, because he can't carry a backpack full of books. So, I had to come up with creative solutions like, okay, why don't you, school, have 2 sets of books, one that remains in the classroom and one that he could keep at home. And that way he doesn't have to, schlep it all back and forth every single day, because physically he can't do it. So I think sometimes as parents, we get caught up in what we're being told. And I'm here to say, disrupt the system, buy into it if it works for your child, but don't be afraid to question it, and don't be afraid to disrupt it. And, when the school would tell me we can't do it this way, I wouldn't take no for an answer. I would say, just because it hasn't been done this way before doesn't mean it can't be done. Help me understand. Like, those are the 3 words that are really effective to use, because it's not in a confrontational way. It's not using your anger and emotions to lead. It just opens up discussion. And after a while, yeah, go ahead.
What I'm hearing with those 3 words, help me understand, that is in essence what curiosity is. right?
Exactly.
Which is what you told me, which is what led to this conversation, is this idea that I don't know if this is innate or if you learned this through a coach or you got this in therapy, but it's almost like you had this instinctual understanding that the only way you were going to get through this was by being curious and asking a lot of questions and being open to different solutions and not getting stuck in that path. So how did you learn to be so curious?
It definitely did not come natural to me. I was, a very well thought out and planned person. And, that all went out the window. And I still tried to control more than I should have. And it sort of all came to a head 5 years ago when Brandon was so severely cyberbullied during his junior year of high school that we had to pull him out of school. And I was so full of stress and anxiety that I ended up a couple of months later being diagnosed with shingles. And I remember going to the doctor, and she said to me, she is seeing more and more younger women, because I used to think shingles was like an older person's diagnosis. And she said, I am diagnosing more and more younger women, and I'm here to tell you it's all due to stress. And that was my wake-up call, that I realized that I was kind of bringing this on to myself, because in my mind, I thought I had to control everything because, here I was like trying to look at life through his eyes, trying to make sure that he had the right tools, that he would be able to navigate through a world not designed for someone of his stature. And what she made me realize is that I've got to let go of the control because it's literally making me sick and affecting my health. And once I convinced myself to do that, things started popping up into our life, into our path. And I'll just give you like a couple of examples. We pulled Brandon out of his high school. My fear was, oh my gosh, is he even going to graduate high school? What is his life going to look like? Is this going to take him down this dark tunnel and ruin him forever? Well, once I learned to let go of control and just say, I have no idea how this is going to play out, what I realized was he became more of a solution seeker. So he realized, you know what, I'm really bored doing this online work, because what we came to find out that the caliber of work was like distilled and a lot more simplified for those at the time who were taking online classes. And so he learned to hack the system, and he did all the work at night. And he said, you know what, it frees up my day. I can start speaking, because that was his dream since he was 15 years old, and he had the opportunity to give a TEDx talk. That was his dream after he gave that talk, that one day he would become a professional speaker. He thought it was just, well, wait until you graduate high school and then go off to college and then start a career. And this, surprise of having to pull him out of high school, taking these boring online classes, he realized I could turn that into an opportunity and start networking and start speaking. So it just is an example that, once we begin to realize that we don't have to be boxed in, we don't have to be on this like straight linear path in order to move forward, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities. And you realize that something in you changes, and you begin to attract people into your life that open doors, like literally random strangers. And it's the most beautiful thing, especially when you are able to look back and connect all the dots.
Well, and what I love is, you gave us this story, and this is an 18-year making of a story, right? So you're like, oh, you're going through this process, and you're being curious, and you're fighting for his rights, and you are asking all these questions. And then when I ask you, well, how did you become curious? You say, well, there was really a pivot 5 years ago. 5 years ago, you've been dealing with this for 22 years. We always think like we get the solution and then that's it. No, this is a 20-year in the making solution that you have found, and that you've allowed yourself to evolve and to grow and to learn. I want to commend you for that, because that's life, right? That's what we're all doing, is growing and evolving. And it takes me back to you, right? I want to hash this out. When we first started the conversation, you said you had this dream of having it all, of being this corporate person and a mom and having the nannies and all these other things. And then we kind of went into Brandon's story. But what happened to Sylvia's dream? What happened to that having it all?
Yeah, having it all redefined itself, because it just ended up that, I realized I need a lot more flexibility in my life to be able to navigate all of these, medical issues. And I ended up leaving corporate America, stayed home for a few months, and realized, what, that's not the path for me either. I mean, power to those full-time moms, but I just knew that I needed something in addition that would give me a sense of creativity, a sense of camaraderie, collaboration. And so I started on an entrepreneurial journey, and with another mom from Brandon's preschool class, we started a traveling gift boutique. And it was perfect because we were able to work around the hours when our kids were in school, and we were able to attend the New York gift show and, learn how to sell not just product, but items with a story behind them. And I think that also really sparked my curiosity, because I didn't want to just bring forth things that everyone else was selling. I wanted to find things that were hidden gems, things that would enable me to speak to customers, because I feel like once you share a story, it kind of bonds you, and the emotion helps to sell. I mean, if you think about it, like, that's the most effective type of marketing, when you could kind of get behind the item and really delve deep into the messaging and help someone connect to that. So that really allowed me to start taking a little bit of a dive into having a sense of curiosity. But I feel like it really was 5 years ago when I started my personal growth journey. And that was also because of a stranger that Brandon and I met. He gave a talk at a nonprofit, and someone in the audience said to him, "Who's your biggest hero?" He said, "Tony Robbins. I'd love to meet him one day." And the reason he said Tony Robbins is because Brandon and I would love to watch TED Talks, and we also love to watch documentaries together. While other boys his age were like running around on the football field or the basketball field or the baseball field, I knew that it wasn't something that he could physically do. So I signed him up for drama lessons, and he loved acting. But when we spent time at home, like, our special thing was to just like watch these different talks and documentaries. And just a couple of months before that stranger asked him who your hero was, he was watching I'm Not Your Guru, which was on Netflix. It is a documentary about Tony Robbins' Date with Destiny program. And as he watched that, he said to me, "Mom, we're going to be there one day." And as it turned out, the stranger was connected to one of Tony's business partners, as she used to live in Dallas. And she said, "I am going to connect you." And we kind of walked away from that saying, yeah, that was nice of her to say, but it's never going to happen. And a couple of weeks later, we get a phone call, and we're invited as Tony's guests to his 3.5-day Unleash the Power Within. So, here he goes from being cyberbullied Thanksgiving to, giving these talks. And then in July, just a few months after the horrific, isolating, devastating event, he's sitting in the front row of Tony Robbins' event, and we both ended up walking on fire and doing things that like you would have asked me a few months prior, like, would you ever consider walking on fire? I'd look at you like you're crazy, you know? So it's
Well,
amazing that
I have
our
to
kids
stop you
open up
here.
worlds. Yeah.
I have to stop you here because you were talking about how devastated you were that this child of yours was telling you that prom life wasn't for him, right? Like, imagine that. We're sitting here suffering. My son might not be able to go to prom. My son might not be able to have the same experiences as his peers. My son isn't going to be homecoming king, and my daughter was homecoming queen. And you're going through all of this stuff. And what you did, Sylvia, was that you empowered him. You said, I'm going to release my expectations of what I think his life should be like. And instead of forcing that, maybe I just take a step back and let whatever life he's supposed to have happen. And by empowering him, all of a sudden, he doesn't need to be at prom. He's too busy walking on fire to be,
Yes.
right? Like it's almost like we can't even fathom the experiences that are out there because we've never known those experiences before. How are we gonna know? So you, in our conversation, you said to me something about growing up, and I want you to share how you feel about growing up with our community.
Yeah, it really amazes me when I take a step back, and what I really encourage every single person in your community, like literally take the time for yourself, not just in terms of self-care to exercise and all that, but give yourself quiet space to journal, to think, to reminisce. Once you do that, you really begin seeing these amazing patterns in your life. And what I've learned about myself is the irony of it all, that, I gave birth to a son whose physical growth stagnated. He stands just under 4 feet tall. Just to give you an idea, that's the average size of like a 7 or an 8-year-old. So at 22, this is his size. And yet he has created this beautiful journey of inner growth that I don't know if I would have discovered on my own. And I feel like our inner growth is so abundant. And in my case, and I feel like many of you could relate as well, it's not until life throws us on our asses, and like rips us open, that we realize that we have the capacity to go on this journey. If things are going along, smoothly, there's no need to change or evolve or grow. But when we feel anger, loss, grief, all these different emotions, that one day we realize, like, I can't sit in this anymore. I can't be stuck in it. I've got to move on. I feel like that's what opens us up for this inner journey. And, it started with Tony Robbins, but, Caro, you and I ran into each other at Summit of Greatness. I've been to dozens of events with Brendan Burchard, Mel Robbins. I mean, I know this whole world, and now virtually, I feel like it's at our fingertips at any given time. And I feel like we as moms owe it to our kids to show them that we don't have all the answers, we don't know it all, and we ourselves are on this journey of growth. And hey, if you're lucky enough to be able to walk alongside a child who is also interested in taking that journey, I can't even tell you how gratifying it is. But no matter what, I feel like our kids are always watching, whether they're 2 years old or 22 years old. My daughter's now 25. I feel like I am giving her a gift when she sees that I am able to learn and grow and transform and evolve, and that, like, she doesn't have to look at her later years of life and this season that I'm in of, having an empty nest, having both of my kids live far away. She doesn't have to look at it in a depressing way because she sees all these exciting things that I'm embarking on. So I think it's really important to realize that we are their role models, and we not only have to see them as people that are evolving and growing every day, but we need to put ourselves in that position as well.
I love that. And there may be a little bit of noise because I hear a dumpster truck, so I had you on mute. But the quote that you said to me, that to me, I took it as a quote because I thought it was so powerful, was, here I am watching my son grow up, and I didn't even realize that he was helping me grow up as a human. And I relate to that so well because I look at my children, and I think we all forget, we all put ourselves in this position of like, we have to be the grownups. Therefore, if we have to be the grownups, we need to have the answers, or we need to have it all figured out, or they need to look up to us. And what a beautiful thing to allow your child to enable your growth, to help you in your growth journey, right? Because we're always growing up at some, we're never fully grown up until we die, right? We're always growing up a little bit. And these children that have these solutions and these creativity and these journeys of themselves, it's almost like they open paths for us as well, which I think is so exciting.
100%. Yeah. And, when we decide to see them for who they are and not the vision of who we want them to be, it just gives them the ability to realize, what, I could try this and I could try that. And I don't have to feel like I'm not enough if I didn't make this team or if I didn't get the top grade. I mean, I really feel like we have the ability to create such a beautiful generation of critical thinkers and questioners and disruptors and noticers. I mean, instead of like going through life and being a robot and living into, mom and dad's expectations, let's create kids that like notice the beauty around them. I mean, like for me, one of the happiest things that I do now that Brandon lives in San Diego is that every time I visit him or every time we travel together to his speaking engagements, we make time to be outdoors and, either enjoy a hike or take a walk or watch the sunset or the sunrise, because it just reminds us that even if air travel sucks, and you have a bad day or whatever, the sun is still going to go down and it's still going to come up the next day. You know what I mean? So like, if we find things that could ground us and bring us together in a way that we both could enjoy, I think that's a beautiful gift. A lot of times, parents are like, I don't know how to talk to my teens. Well, figure out how to get into their world, like figure out what ignites their soul and try to learn more of that. For me, the speaking industry wasn't really a blip on my radar at all. But when I took him to that first influence and he was 17 years old, and on day 2, he looked at me and he said, Mom, these are my people and this is the career that I want. And I'd like for you to be my manager and work with me. Then I was like, you better believe it. I'm all in. And like, I find it a privilege to be able to have a 22-year-old that wants me to work with him, first of all. And second of all, it gives me a new sense of curiosity and like, how do we stay relevant? What do I need to learn? What are new things that are going on out there? What are things that we could do that no one else is doing? Like it just gives you more excitement in life. And I feel like all of us have the opportunity to bring more of that into our lives.
And as a woman, especially women that are in the child rearing stages, I think oftentimes we tend to to focus so much of the middle years on raising children, and we're so afraid of them growing up or not being moms anymore. And I think relevance is a big reason. It's like, are you going to be a relevant human once your children are out of the house, right? Like, if you're a stay-at-home mom, or you are just uber focused on being a mom, or your children are your life and that's like your thing, when they're grown, how will you be relevant? And I think what you're saying and what I'm hearing is you have a whole life ahead of you post raising children. You have a whole life ahead of you pre-raising children, post raising children, during raising children. Like, they add to your journey, but you have your own journey, whether, regardless of where your kids are at, you have your own journey. And you get to, I feel like you, Sylvia, are living different lives. It's almost like you lived your corporate world life, you lived your young, your youth life, you lived your like mother of these two kids life, you lived your fighting life when you were fighting for Brandon, and now you're living this entrepreneurial life. It's like you get all these different identities. I mean, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think it also helps to really widen your circle of friends and have friends who are younger than you, who are older than you, who have different viewpoints than you, because it just like opens up a world of possibilities. And you realize that, you can get your energy from other people's journeys. You don't have to walk the same steps as they do, but it's a really beautiful thing when you almost add like new flavors and more diversity into your friend group. And I know sometimes, we may live in areas that limit us, but now with technology and the virtual world and the community that you've created, it's so easy to expand that circle and see the possibilities. And truthfully, I feel like I'm more excited about my life now than I was even 10 years ago. Because like 10 years ago, I was like in the thick of the muck. And I don't know about you all, but if you've got middle school kids, like those aren't necessarily the years that like you would choose to go back to your younger self, or have your kids go back to that, because it's a time where they're like, they don't know if they're a kid or an adult, or, like things are changing. There's a lot of angst. And so just looking back, I know I felt differently about life. And I'm like, right now, I feel so excited about what's to come. And that doesn't negate the fact that there is craziness going on outside of us, and the world is hurting and there's a lot of suffering. But at the end of the day, we can't control any of that, but we can control how we react to it. And if we decide to react by opening our hearts and minds and learning how to better connect with people and asking questions of people, like one of my favorite things to do is on an airplane, not everyone is open to it, but I've met so many interesting people that I've sat next to that like, we just start speaking, and life wouldn't have brought us together in other situations, but it's just amazing when you open yourself up. And, for those of you that will be in NSA and you'll hear Brandon's talk, what led him to speaking was a random stranger that we met at the Richmond airport. And I look back and I realize, thank goodness I taught my kids not to be weary of strangers, but yet to open up, and just say hello. And it may be just a quick hello and you're both on your way to like different destinations, or it may be a quick hello that leads to amazing conversation and connection. And this stranger ended up literally changing the trajectory of my son's life. And that was just the beginning. I mean, I told you about the stranger that led us to Tony Robbins, and there have been strangers all along. And I feel like all of us have strangers on our path. But how many of us get so caught up in the hectic craziness of life that we're just focused on getting to like our next appointment, our next destination, and we sort of have these blinders on and we don't realize the beautiful people that are around us. So I say, slow down, be open to connection, smile, say hello. You just never know how that could totally change someone's day, someone's mood, someone's life.
I have a friend who says there are no strangers, they're just friends you haven't met yet. And
I
I
love
think that's
that.
such a powerful thing. And I have to tell you, while you were talking and sharing the Tony Robbins story, we have people have been chiming in on the chat, and everybody's just so inspired by you right now, Sylvia. And Caroline, who's a dear friend of mine, 20 years my junior, but she's like she's mini me, right? Like she's Caroline 20 years ago. She's 20 years younger than me, but we're borderlines, and we have such similar paths. And Caroline wrote, when you were talking about the Tony Robbins, she wrote on the chat, synchronicity. And the reason she wrote that word is because she taught me that word. She taught me the word synchronicity because she and I met in an airport in Korea. We literally met in an airport in Korea, where our lives were going to change forever. She was going to end up being my son's tutor. She's from Georgia and I'm from Miami, and she tutored my child in Korea. And who would have known that our paths were meant to do such big things together? And now she's a member of my community, and she wants to open a chapter of my community in Savannah, and our worlds are just intertwining. And she would always say to me, oh, this is synchronicity. My dad taught me about this. My dad taught me about synchronicity. She has a similar relationship with her dad like I had with mine, who passed away. And it was all what you're describing right now. It's this openness to strangers, to random coincidences, to possibilities, to the magic that happens. And it feels like, Sylvia, you turn the faucet on and now you can't turn it off.
That's right. Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
It's like you're on there and you there's nowhere to go, right? Like once you open yourself to that kind of curiosity and to really living in that world, you just can't even describe the experiences, and they almost feel unbelievable, right? They feel like if I told you that, you'd think I was lying, but it happens.
It's so true. And it makes you realize that like you are the designer, you're the curator. And, like so many people complain that social media is full of negativity and this and that. Well, you know what? You're in charge of your own feed. Like you could literally mute people, block them, either unfriend them or, whatever, to make sure that your feed is full of like these energizing people that are doing things that make you believe in the goodness of humanity. And we are just able to change our mood just by what we consume, and like not having the TV, whatever network you watch on in the background, limiting yourself to like a half hour, an hour a day, whatever is right for you. And yeah, it becomes just a beautiful, beautiful cycle. And then you want to find opportunity like to be that person for someone else, because you realize the ripple effect of this, random stranger who came into your path that changed everything. And you want to be that for another person. And imagine like if we all had the opportunity to do that, what a tsunami of magic would happen in the world. And again, it makes our kids see the possibilities that are out there and realize that we all have the ability to live in abundance and not focus on the limitations, whether they're perceived or real.
I love that. I love that. And, something that is so interesting is that we control so much of our lives, and yet we have no control over our lives, right? So we are the programmers, and yet life happens for us. We can write our destiny, but we don't even know what that destiny is, right? There's this paradox. It's so interesting how we're given just enough of an illusion of control and yet no control at the same time, right? So that's why I think your curiosity is so important, is the idea that, yeah, you can control what you can control, like your social media feed or your attitude, your thoughts, who you surround yourself, all these other things. But it's open to the unknown and being and understanding that all of it, even the grief, the negativity, the tragedies, the things that may have appeared to have been the worst thing that could have happened to you in your lives, having the curiosity to understand that those things are things that may actually be saving you at some point.
Yeah, for sure. And also I feel like it's very important, especially as women, to remind ourselves that we need to control how we speak to ourselves, right? Because that internal voice could get so critical that like we would never say half the stuff to our worst enemy, but we feel like we're constantly, trying to do better and be better. And in the process, we sometimes can beat ourselves up over things that instead we could kind of give ourselves some grace and self-compassion about. So I think that really does make a difference in how we show up as well. And then the other thing I would say is that, when you strip everything down, control is because we let fear lead the way. So what if instead of being fearful when it comes to the unknown or the future, or my child hasn't had a normal educational experience because of the pandemic, I'm scared of how are they going to keep up, or have they fallen behind? What if we just look at it as an opportunity to learn from and something to get excited about? And I feel like that is just like a tiny little shift, but I know that it really has helped me in terms of getting more effective coping skills and realizing that I don't need to let fear dictate my day, my life, my thoughts. And instead I could just tweak it a little bit and get excited instead of fearful.
Yeah, and it's having that deep understanding that it's rigged in your favor, that things are going to work out, and if you were just open to it, things will find it'll way, even if you don't know the path right now. Sylvia, this has been such an amazing call. You are a ball of wisdom. If everybody can please give her some love on the chat, because she is just,
I've got to put on my glasses to read it.
Thank you so much for oh my God, people have been saying so much wisdom in these words, very inspirational. Amen. Synchronicity. What a story. I loved it. It has just been absolutely phenomenal. Thank you for sharing your time with us. Thank you for being here. For anyone who doesn't know about National Speakers Association, you got to join us in Nashville, Tennessee this year, because as you can tell, there's amazing people there. So if you've ever wanted to be in the world of speaking, this is a great opportunity for you to join Sylvia and Brandon and myself. And my friend Betsy will be there as well. So we encourage you guys to come. My flight was canceled this morning, and now I know why it was. It needed to be on this call.
Wow.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. Thank you. And as a quick announcement before we go, for those of you who want to design your life, we're having a create your own mission statement workshop coming up on June 24th. Look at my Instagram. For those of you that are in the community, make sure that you look at the event details, register for the event, because this is the kind of life that we are creating, right? Is we are the programmers of our life, and creating your mission statement is so aligned with that. Now, if you want to keep up with all of Sylvia's amazing journey, please follow her on Instagram at Speak Beyond Words, right?
Yes.
Sylvia?
Instagram.
Speak Beyond Words.
Speak Beyond Words
Okay.
on Instagram,
and
on Facebook.
How else would you want to connect with the community?
Yeah. And Brandon's journey, which I am part of as well. You can certainly check out his content on Instagram. Yes. His handle is at Farbstein, which is my last name. His website, brandonfarbstein.com, gives you an idea of all the stuff that he's doing. He's the author of 2 books. The first is 10 Feet Tall, and the second one just came out a few months ago, a much needed children's book called A Kid's Book About Self-Love. And it literally is about learning how to look in the mirror and celebrate your uniqueness rather than seeing your flaws. And although it's meant for children ages 5 to 10, every single adult who has read it alongside with kids have found the message to be so powerful. He even has a self-love oath in the back to teach his readers the power of positive affirmations. So, yeah, if you have anyone in your life that would find this of value, please check out his books.
Tell me the name of the title of the book so I can write it exactly as it is.
Oh, sure. 10 Feet Tall is his first book. And
I have that one.
And his second book is A Kid's Book About Self-Love.
A kid's book about self-love. Okay, everybody,
Yeah.
You've been put on notice. A kid's book about self-love. If you do not have this book delivered to you on Amazon immediately, that's on you. So you guys need to go ahead and order it, and then report back to us and tell us what you think about the book. And
I just put his website on there too.
I put it right
Okay.
above. I put all your handles, your name, your website, everything's on there. So for those of you that want to follow along with Sylvia, and send her an Instagram and tell her how much she impacted your life, and share with her how you feel about the book. And let's all stay connected, because as you know, we are not strangers. We are just friends that hadn't met yet.
I love that.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. It was great having you. I am grateful for you for this conversation.
Oh, thank you for letting me join your community. Bye. Enjoy your vacation.
Thank you.